In a quiet suburban town where life usually moved at a slow pace, an unexpected incident shattered the calm and exposed deep-rooted tensions. The story begins on a sunny afternoon when 16-year-old Maya Johnson was driving her family car home from school. Maya was a bright and ambitious teenager who took pride in her appearance, especially her long braids that she had been growing for years. To her, they weren't just hair, they were a symbol of her identity and culture. Maya's day started like any other. She stopped at a red light, tapping her fingers lightly on the steering wheel as her favorite song played softly on the radio. But moments later, blue and red lights flashed behind her. Her heart sank as she pulled over to the side of the road. Officer Karen Miller stepped out of her patrol car, her demeanor already stern before she even reached Maya's window. Karen was known in the community for her short temper and harsh approach, particularly toward people of color. Many residents had whispered about her unfair treatment, but no one dared to speak up. When Karen approached the car, she immediately began questioning Maya. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" she asked sharply, peering into the vehicle. Maya shook her head, confused. "No, ma'am," she replied politely. Karen frowned and glanced at Maya's driver's license, which confirmed she was legally allowed to drive. Still unsatisfied, Karen continued probing. "Why are you driving this late? Where are you coming from?" Maya answered calmly, explaining that she was heading home after staying late at school for a club meeting. But Karen wasn't convinced. Her eyes narrowed as she scrutinized Maya's appearance, lingering on her braids. "This hairstyle, it looks unprofessional," Karen remarked dismissively. Maya blinked in disbelief. Was this really happening? She tried to explain that her hair was part of her cultural heritage, but Karen cut her off. "Don't make excuses," she snapped. The situation quickly spiraled out of control. Ignoring Maya's protests and completely disregarding proper procedure, Karen grew more aggressive. She claimed Maya's braids violated some vague grooming policy, though such a rule didn't actually exist, and decided to take matters into her own hands. Pulling out a pair of scissors from her utility belt, Karen declared she would fix the problem herself. Maya froze in shock, unable to believe what was unfolding. As Karen began cutting away Maya's braids, tears welled up in the young girl's eyes. Each snip felt like an attack not only on her hair, but on her dignity. Passers-by stared in horror, unsure of how to intervene. By the time Karen stepped back, satisfied with her handiwork, Maya's once beautiful braids lay scattered on the ground. Her scalp was unevenly shaved, leaving her humiliated and broken. Though Maya remained silent during the ordeal, inside, she vowed never to forget this moment, or the person responsible. Little did Karen realize, her reckless actions would set off a chain reaction that would change both their lives forever. For now, though, the damage was done, and Maya drove home with a heavy heart, wondering how anyone could treat another person so cruelly. Karen's life after the scandal became a shadow of what it once was. Stripped of her badge, ostracized by her peers, and drowning in legal fees, she found herself grappling with emotions she had never allowed herself to feel before. Shame, regret, and fear. Her days were spent in solitude, watching news reports about her case and scrolling through social media comments that branded her as a symbol of everything wrong with law enforcement. She tried to rationalize her actions, convincing herself that she had simply been following orders or enforcing rules, but deep down, she knew better. One afternoon, while sitting alone in her dimly lit living room, Karen stumbled upon an interview Maya gave to a national news outlet. In the clip, Maya spoke calmly yet powerfully about the incident and its impact on her life. "What happened to me wasn't just about my hair," Maya said, her voice steady. "It was about being treated like I didn't matter because of how I look." As Karen listened, tears welled up in her eyes for the first time since the ordeal began. For so long, she had viewed Maya as an adversary, a teenager who had exaggerated a minor issue to ruin her career. But now she saw something else. A young girl whose dignity had been stripped away in front of her. Haunted by these thoughts, Karen decided to attend one of the community meetings organized by Senator James Johnson. The event was held at a local church, where residents gathered to discuss police reform and share their experiences with law enforcement. Karen hesitated outside the door, her heart pounding as she wondered if anyone would recognize her. Summoning what little courage she had left, she stepped inside and took a seat at the back, trying to blend into the crowd. As people stood up to speak, Karen listened intently. One woman recounted how officers had dismissed her concerns when her son went missing. A man described being pulled over repeatedly for no reason other than the color of his skin. Each story painted a picture of systemic failure, reinforcing what Karen already suspected. The problem wasn't just her, it was the culture she had been part of for years. When Senator Johnson addressed the group, he emphasized the importance of accountability, but also urged compassion. "We can't move forward without acknowledging the pain we've caused," he said. "But we also can't heal without forgiveness." Feeling a lump form in her throat, Karen considered standing up to apologize publicly. But as she glanced around the room, she realized the weight of her presence might do more harm than good. Instead, she quietly slipped out after the meeting ended, her mind racing with conflicting emotions. She wanted to make amends, but she also understood that redemption wasn't something she could demand. It had to be earned. Back home, Karen began volunteering at a local shelter, hoping to rebuild her sense of purpose. Though she kept her identity hidden, word eventually spread among staff members about who she was. Some were wary of working alongside her, while others believed everyone deserved a second chance. Slowly, Karen started opening up to those willing to listen, sharing her struggles and expressing remorse for her past behavior. It wasn't easy. Some days, the guilt felt unbearable. But through small acts of kindness, she hoped to prove that she was capable of change. Meanwhile, Maya continued to inspire others with her resilience. She joined youth-led initiatives, focused on racial justice, and became a vocal advocate for policy reforms aimed at ending discriminatory practices within policing. While she appreciated Karen's attempts to reach out, she made it clear that forgiveness wasn't something she owed anyone. Healing, she explained, was a personal journey, not a transaction. For Karen, the road ahead remained uncertain. Redemption wasn't guaranteed, and trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight. But as she looked in the mirror each morning, she reminded herself of one thing. The same choices that led to her downfall could guide her toward a better path, if she chose to take it. Months after the incident that changed everything, the small suburban town where it all began looked different, not in its streets or buildings, but in the way people thought and acted. The protests had died down, replaced by ongoing conversations about fairness, respect, and accountability. The police department underwent significant changes, implementing new policies designed to prevent similar incidents from happening again. Officers were required to attend bias training sessions regularly, and an independent oversight board was established to review complaints against law enforcement. While some skeptics doubted whether these measures would truly make a difference, others saw them as steps toward meaningful progress. For Maya Johnson, life slowly began returning to normal, or at least a new version of it. Her hair had started growing back, though she still flinched sometimes when catching sight of her reflection. What hadn't faded was the strength she discovered within herself during those difficult months. She became a role model for young people everywhere, speaking at schools and community events about standing up for what's right, even when it feels scary. "I didn't choose this fight," she often said, "but I'm proud of how we've turned pain into purpose." Maya's advocacy work took her far beyond her hometown. She collaborated with organizations focused on racial justice, helping draft proposals for statewide reforms aimed at eliminating discriminatory practices in policing. Her father, Senator James Johnson, continued championing these causes on Capitol Hill, introducing legislation inspired by his daughter's story. Together, they proved that while one person could spark change, collective action could sustain it. As for Officer Karen Miller, her journey was far more complicated. After being formally terminated from the police force, she struggled to find steady employment. Many employers hesitated to hire someone whose name carried so much baggage, no matter how remorseful she claimed to be. Eventually, she settled into a quiet job at a local library, shelving books and assisting patrons. It wasn't glamorous, but it allowed her to stay out of the spotlight and focus on rebuilding her life. Karen also continued volunteering at the shelter, pouring her energy into helping others. Over time, some members of the community began warming up to her, recognizing her efforts to atone for her past mistakes. Though forgiveness came slowly, if at all, she found solace in knowing she was contributing positively, even in small ways. On tough days, she reminded herself of something a shelter volunteer once told her: change starts with the choice to do better. Despite the strides made, tensions lingered. Some residents remained skeptical of the reforms, fearing they were merely superficial fixes to deeper problems. Others argued that holding individuals accountable wasn't enough, that real transformation required addressing systemic inequalities embedded in society. These debates kept the conversation alive, ensuring that the lessons learned from Maya's ordeal wouldn't fade away. In the end, the story wasn't just about one teenager, one officer, or one family. It was about the power of courage and resilience in the face of injustice. For Maya, it was proof that speaking your truth could inspire others to do the same. For Karen, it was a reminder that actions have consequences, and redemption requires more than apologies. It demands consistent effort. And for the community, it was a wake-up call, urging everyone to reflect on their roles in creating a fairer, kinder world. One evening, as Maya sat on her porch watching the sunset, she thought about how far she'd come since that fateful day. The scars, both visible and invisible, would always be part of her story, but they no longer defined her. She smiled softly, feeling grateful for the support she'd received and hopeful for the future. Change wasn't easy, but it was possible. And sometimes, all it took was one brave voice to start the ripple effect. The aftermath of the traffic stop left Maya shaken to her core. As she drove home, tears streaming down her face, she couldn't stop touching the uneven patches on her scalp where her beloved braids once were. Every glance in the rearview mirror reminded her of what had just happened. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, and her mind raced with questions. Why did this happen to me? What did I do wrong? The injustice of it all weighed heavily on her heart. When Maya finally arrived home, she parked the car and sat there for a moment, trying to gather herself. She knew her parents would notice something was wrong immediately, but she didn't know how to explain what had happened. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the car and walked inside. Her mother, Lisa, was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she saw Maya. One look at her daughter's tear-streaked face and shaved head stopped her in her tracks. "Maya, sweetheart, what happened?" Lisa asked, rushing over to hug her. Maya tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she handed her mother the crumpled ticket Karen had given her during the stop. Lisa read it quickly, confusion turning into anger as she realized the absurdity of the situation. "This is ridiculous," Lisa muttered under her breath. "Let's call your father. He needs to hear about this." Senator James Johnson was away on business in Washington, D.C., attending important meetings related to his work on civil rights legislation. When he received the call from Lisa, his voice grew tense with concern. Hearing his wife describe what had happened to their daughter sent waves of fury through him, but he forced himself to stay calm. "For now. I'm coming home tonight," he said firmly. "We'll handle this together." That evening, the Johnson family gathered around the dining table to discuss what to do next. Maya recounted every detail of the encounter, her voice trembling as she relived the humiliation. Senator Johnson listened intently, his jaw tightening with each word. He could see the pain in his daughter's eyes and felt a mix of emotions: anger, helplessness, and determination. This wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a reflection of the systemic issues he had been fighting against for years. Determined to take action, Maya decided to share her story online. With her parents' support, she wrote a heartfelt post describing the events of that day, attaching photos of her shaved head alongside screenshots of the bogus ticket. Before hitting post, she hesitated, wondering if anyone would care or if speaking out would only make things worse. But then she remembered the way Officer Karen had treated her, as if she didn't matter, and pressed send. Within hours, the post went viral. People across the country were outraged by what they read. Comments poured in, expressing sympathy for Maya and demanding accountability for Officer Karen. Hashtags like #JusticeForMaya began trending on social media, drawing attention not only to Maya's case, but also to similar stories of discrimination faced by countless others. News outlets picked up the story, amplifying its reach and sparking widespread debate about racial profiling and police misconduct. As the public outcry grew louder, protests erupted outside the local police station. Community members held signs reading "Respect our rights" and "No justice, no peace." Even people who didn't know Maya personally joined the movement, united by their shared desire for change. Meanwhile, Officer Karen remained oblivious to the storm brewing around her. Back at the station, she casually bragged to colleagues about teaching that girl a lesson, unaware that her actions had ignited a national firestorm. For Maya, seeing the overwhelming support from strangers gave her a glimmer of hope. Though the pain of losing her hair still lingered, she found strength in knowing she wasn't alone. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about standing up against injustice and holding those in power accountable. And while she couldn't undo what had been done, she vowed to turn her pain into purpose. Unbeknownst to everyone, however, the true magnitude of the fallout was yet to come. As the investigation unfolded, pieces of information began to surface that would leave Officer Karen reeling and reveal just how much bigger this story truly was. The viral post about Maya's ordeal spread like wildfire, igniting conversations in households, workplaces, and online forums across the country. What started as a single teenager sharing her painful experience quickly transformed into a national movement. People from all walks of life were moved by Maya's courage in speaking out, and many saw themselves or their loved ones reflected in her story. The injustice she faced resonated deeply, especially among communities that had long endured similar treatment, but often felt powerless to fight back. As hashtags like #JusticeForMaya trended on social media platforms, news outlets scrambled to cover the growing controversy. Reporters interviewed Maya, with her family's permission, capturing her quiet strength as she recounted the traumatic traffic stop. Her words struck a chord with viewers. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said softly during one interview. "All I was doing was driving home. No one deserves to be treated like this." Her sincerity touched hearts, turning her into an unexpected symbol of resilience. The public outrage wasn't limited to social media. In Maya's hometown, hundreds of people gathered outside the police station to demand answers. Protesters carried signs with messages like "End racial profiling now" and "Protect our children." Some shared their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of law enforcement, creating a powerful sense of solidarity. Among them were teachers, classmates, and friends who knew Maya personally and wanted to stand by her side. Local leaders also joined the protests, calling for accountability and reform within the department. Meanwhile, Officer Karen Miller remained oblivious to the full extent of the backlash. At the station, she brushed off rumors of protests and dismissed the online chatter as exaggerated drama. To her, Maya was just another teenager who needed to learn respect for authority, and she refused to see how her actions had crossed a line. When colleagues mentioned seeing Senator James Johnson's name tied to the case, Karen shrugged it off. She had no idea who he was or why his involvement mattered. But behind the scenes, things were escalating quickly. Senator Johnson returned home earlier than planned, skipping several key meetings in Washington, D.C., to address the situation. As soon as he arrived, he held a family meeting with Maya and Lisa to discuss their next steps. Though visibly shaken by what had happened to his daughter, Senator Johnson channeled his emotions into action. He called an emergency press conference, determined to shine a light on the systemic issues that allowed such incidents to occur. At the press conference, Maya stood beside her father, holding his hand tightly. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions, but Senator Johnson maintained composure. "My daughter is not alone," he declared firmly. "What happened to her is a reflection of a much larger problem, a system that devalues black lives and perpetuates inequality. We will not rest until there is justice for Maya and meaningful change in our community." The crowd erupted in applause, and Maya felt a surge of pride despite her lingering pain. For the first time since the incident, she realized her voice could make a difference. Still, she couldn't shake the image of Officer Karen cutting her braids, of the cold indifference in her eyes. As much as Maya wanted justice, she wondered if Karen even understood the harm she had caused. Little did anyone know, the truth about Karen's recklessness was about to come crashing down around her. While the protests continued and calls for accountability grew louder, investigators began digging deeper into Officer Karen's past. Records revealed a troubling pattern of discriminatory behavior during traffic stops, arrests, and interactions with minority residents. Internal Affairs launched a formal investigation, reviewing body cam footage and interviewing witnesses. It became clear that Karen's actions toward Maya weren't an isolated mistake. They were part of a broader issue within the department. Back at the station, whispers circulated among officers about Karen's future. Some defended her, claiming she was simply following protocol, while others admitted they had warned her about her abrasive tactics before, but none of them anticipated the storm that was heading straight for her, or the role Maya's influential family would play in exposing the truth. The fallout from Officer Karen Miller's actions reached a tipping point when the police department officially announced her suspension without pay, pending termination proceedings. It was a decision that sent shockwaves through both the community and the law enforcement agency itself. For years, officers like Karen had operated under a veil of impunity, their misconduct often swept under the rug. But this time was different. The combination of Senator James Johnson's influence, public outrage, and undeniable evidence left no room for leniency. Karen's colleagues at the station reacted with a mix of discomfort and relief. Some privately admitted they had long suspected she crossed lines, but were too afraid to speak up. Others distanced themselves entirely, unwilling to be associated with someone whose name had become synonymous with prejudice and abuse of power. The atmosphere in the department grew tense as internal investigations expanded beyond Karen's case, shining a spotlight on systemic issues that many would rather have kept hidden. For Karen, the suspension felt like a personal attack. Stripped of her badge and gun, she retreated into isolation, avoiding public spaces where she might encounter judgmental stares or harsh words. Her once confident demeanor crumbled under the weight of guilt and humiliation. She spent hours replaying the traffic stop in her mind, questioning how things could have gone so wrong. Yet even in her lowest moments, she struggled to fully acknowledge the depth of her mistakes. Instead, she oscillated between blaming Maya for speaking out and resenting the system for abandoning her. Meanwhile, Senator Johnson wasted no time in pursuing broader accountability. He filed a lawsuit against not only Karen but also the entire police department, accusing them of fostering an environment that enabled discriminatory behavior. The legal battle became national news, drawing attention from civil rights organizations, lawmakers, and activists eager to support the cause. Maya's story served as a rallying cry, highlighting the urgent need for reform within law enforcement agencies across the country. In response to the growing pressure, city officials announced sweeping changes aimed at addressing systemic racism within the department. Mandatory bias training programs were implemented, along with stricter oversight measures to ensure transparency and accountability. Officers were required to wear body cameras at all times, and independent review boards were established to investigate complaints of misconduct. While these steps were welcomed by many, skeptics argued they were merely surface-level fixes unless accompanied by genuine cultural shifts within policing. Despite the progress being made, Karen remained consumed by regret and fear. With mounting legal fees and no income to rely on, her life unraveled further. Friends stopped calling, and neighbors avoided her altogether, leaving her feeling more alone than ever. Desperate to salvage something from the wreckage, she decided to reach out to Maya directly. Sitting at her kitchen table late one night, she penned a handwritten letter, a rare act of vulnerability for someone who prided herself on authority. "I know I hurt you," Karen wrote, her handwriting shaky and uneven. "I want you to know that I never intended for things to go as far as they did. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me." She hesitated before signing her name, unsure if her apology would even matter. The next morning, she mailed the letter, clinging to the faint hope that it might offer some form of redemption. When Maya received the letter days later, she read it silently, her emotions swirling. Part of her appreciated the gesture. It was the first time Karen had acknowledged wrongdoing, but another part questioned its sincerity. Was this truly an apology, or simply an attempt to ease her own conscience? After showing the letter to her parents, Maya decided to respond, not with anger, but with honesty. "Your actions caused me pain that won't disappear overnight," she wrote. "An apology is a start, but real change requires more than words." As the weeks passed, Karen's future remained uncertain. Termination proceedings loomed, and the lawsuit threatened to drag on for months. Though she had begun to confront the consequences of her actions, the road to rebuilding trust, if such a thing was even possible, was long and arduous. For Maya, however, the focus shifted toward healing and advocacy. She realized forgiveness wasn't something she owed anyone. It was a choice she would make in her own time. And while justice for her case was unfolding, she knew the fight for equality and respect was far from over. As the investigation into Officer Karen Miller intensified, cracks in her carefully constructed facade began to show. For years, she had operated under the belief that her badge shielded her from consequences, dismissing complaints and brushing off warnings as mere annoyances. But now, faced with mounting evidence of misconduct, Karen found herself on shaky ground for the first time in her career. What started as a routine traffic stop had spiraled out of control, and she was beginning to realize just how far-reaching the repercussions could be. At first, Karen tried to downplay the situation. She told anyone who would listen that Maya's viral post was an exaggeration, a distortion of events meant to paint her as the villain. "I was just doing my job," she insisted to her colleagues at the station. "If people don't like it, that's their problem." Her tone was defensive, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The weight of public scrutiny was starting to wear her down. Things took a turn when internal investigators requested access to her personnel file. Records revealed a troubling pattern: multiple complaints over the years alleging discriminatory behavior during traffic stops, arrests, and interactions with minority residents. Many of these complaints had gone unaddressed, swept under the rug by higher-ups who prioritized keeping the peace over holding officers accountable. Now those overlooked grievances were coming back to haunt her. Bodycam footage from the day of Maya's traffic stop became a focal point of the investigation. When played back, the video painted a starkly different picture than the one Karen had described in her initial report. Viewers could clearly see her escalating the situation without cause, ignoring Maya's polite responses, and ultimately resorting to cutting her hair, a move so extreme it left even seasoned investigators stunned. The footage quickly became damning evidence against her. Despite the mounting pressure, Karen clung to denial. She convinced herself that if she stuck to her story, others would eventually see things her way. That illusion shattered when a colleague mentioned Senator James Johnson's involvement again, this time with more urgency. "Do you know who he is?" the colleague asked, lowering his voice. "He's not just some random guy. He's got connections everywhere. You're in serious trouble." It wasn't until Karen looked up Senator Johnson online that reality hit her like a freight train. Scrolling through articles about his work on civil rights legislation and his high-profile campaigns, she realized she had underestimated the scope of what she was dealing with. This wasn't just any family. This was a powerful political figure whose influence extended far beyond their small town. Panic set in as she imagined the headlines: "Officer shaves teen's hair. faces wrath of influential senator. Desperate to salvage her reputation, Karen scrambled to defend herself. She drafted lengthy emails to her superiors, insisting she had acted within protocol and accusing critics of blowing the incident out of proportion. She even reached out to friends outside the department, hoping for support. But the tide had already turned against her. Colleagues distanced themselves, fearing association with someone embroiled in such controversy. Friends stopped answering her calls, unwilling to get caught in the crossfire. In a last-ditch effort to regain control of the narrative, Karen appeared on a local news segment, claiming she was being unfairly targeted. "People are making me out to be some kind of monster," she said, her voice trembling. "But I'm just a hard-working officer trying to keep our streets safe." Her attempt at self-defense fell flat. Instead of garnering sympathy, her comments reignited public outrage, with viewers criticizing her lack of accountability and refusal to acknowledge the harm she had caused. Back at home, Karen struggled to process the unraveling of her life. Sleepless nights became the norm as she replayed the events in her mind, questioning whether she could have handled things differently. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that her actions had been wrong, not just legally or professionally, but morally. Yet every time guilt crept in, she pushed it away, clinging to the belief that admitting fault would only make things worse. Unbeknownst to Karen, her attempts to justify her actions were sealing her fate. Investigators compiled their findings into a comprehensive report, detailing years of misconduct and culminating in the incident with Maya. Internal Affairs recommended her immediate suspension pending termination proceedings, citing gross abuse of power and violation of department policies. By the time the memo landed on her desk, Karen knew it was too late to undo the damage she had caused. When Senator James Johnson stepped off the plane from Washington, D.C., his expression was a mix of fury and determination. Though he had spent years advocating for civil rights on Capitol Hill, nothing could have prepared him for seeing his own daughter become a victim of the very injustices he fought against daily. The moment he walked through the door of their home, Maya ran to him, tears streaming down her face. He hugged her tightly, feeling her pain as if it were his own. Lisa filled him in on everything that had happened since the viral post took off. How strangers had rallied around Maya, how protests erupted outside the police station, and how Officer Karen remained unapologetic. As he listened, Senator Johnson's mind raced with thoughts of what needed to be done next. This wasn't just about punishing one officer. It was about dismantling a system that allowed such cruelty to happen unchecked. The next morning, Senator Johnson sat down with Maya and Lisa to strategize. "We're going to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else," he told them firmly. But first, they agreed. The world needed to hear directly from Maya. With her permission, he arranged a press conference at City Hall, a place where countless decisions affecting their community were made. It would send a clear message. This wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a call for systemic change. On the day of the press conference, cameras lined the steps of City Hall as reporters buzzed with anticipation. When Senator Johnson appeared alongside Maya, the crowd fell silent. Maya clutched her father's hand nervously, but when she looked up at him, she saw the same quiet strength that always reassured her. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward to speak. "I never thought something like this could happen to me," Maya began, her voice trembling slightly. "All I did was drive home after school. I didn't break any laws, and I didn't deserve to be treated the way I was." She paused, gathering courage before continuing. "What happened to me isn't just about my hair. It's about respect. It's about being seen as a human being, not judged by the color of my skin or the style of my hair." Her words struck a chord with everyone listening, both in person and online. By the time she finished speaking, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Senator Johnson then addressed the crowd, amplifying his daughter's message. "My daughter is brave, but no child should have to endure what she went through," he said, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "This isn't just about holding one officer accountable. It's about demanding justice and reform. We cannot let fear and prejudice dictate how our communities are policed. As the press conference unfolded, details emerged about Senator Johnson's plans. He announced that he would file a lawsuit not only against Officer Karen, but also against the entire police department for failing to address patterns of misconduct. Additionally, he pledged to introduce legislation aimed at preventing racial profiling and ensuring accountability within law enforcement agencies nationwide. His bold moves sent shockwaves through the political sphere, drawing widespread praise and some criticism from colleagues and opponents alike. Back at the police station, news of the press conference reached Officer Karen. At first, she dismissed it as media hype, convinced that people would eventually forget about the incident. But as more details surfaced about Senator Johnson's influence and the growing public outcry, unease crept into her mind. For the first time, she started paying closer attention to the headlines, and the name Senator James Johnson kept appearing everywhere. Karen's colleagues noticed her growing anxiety. Some tried to offer advice, while others distanced themselves, fearing guilt by association. One officer cautiously mentioned that Senator Johnson was known for his relentless pursuit of justice. "You might want to prepare yourself," the colleague warned. But Karen waved them off, still clinging to the belief that she had done nothing wrong. Unbeknownst to Karen, investigators were already combing through years of records related to her conduct on duty. Bodycam footage from the traffic stop painted a damning picture of her aggression and disregard for protocol. Witnesses came forward, recounting similar incidents where Karen had targeted individuals based on race or socioeconomic status. Each piece of evidence added weight to the case against her, leaving little room for denial. For Maya, watching her father take charge brought a sense of validation she hadn't expected. Though the scars of the incident remained, she felt empowered knowing that her story was sparking real change. And while she couldn't predict what lay ahead, one thing was certain. Officer Karen's actions had set off a chain reaction that would alter the course of many lives, including her own.